President Duterte admits to having been shocked after seeing the brutal killings in Tarlac. He is calling the suspect a crazy cop and he wants him jailed. He says the incident is an isolated case and that he still loves and believes in the police. The officer behind the murder, Jonel Nuesca, may have escaped dismissal from service in past homicide complaints, but the PNP this time assures he will be axed by January next year. A fierce rise in COVID-19 infections is already here, as infections in the National Capital Region has reached its highest in 2 months. The Octa research team is recommending localized lockdowns to help mitigate the spike. The palace is now opening its doors to the possibility of a travel ban on the United Kingdom. Research shows the new UK strain is more transmissible and is more likely to affect children. And U.S. President-elect Joe Biden finally receives a jab of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. The U.S. Congress has also passed a multi-billion-dollar relief package. Let's start with President Duterte, who condemned what he says is a crazy cop's killing of a mother and son in Tarlac. While he described the incident as too brutal, critics pointed out that it may be the president himself who helped harvest such a culture of impunity. Maricel Halili with a big story.
I will not hesitate. My orders are sa pulis pati military, pati mga barangay, na pagka ginulo at nagkaroon ng okasyon na lumaban at ang buhay ninyo ay nalagay sa alanganin, shoot them dead.
This has been President Duterte's recurring directive whenever he addresses the police and the military. But after seeing the video footage of Police Senior Master Sergeant Jonel Nuesca brutally shooting mother and son Sonia and Frank Gregorio, President Duterte admitted that he too was surprised that a member of the police force actually did shoot them dead.
Isa lang itong klaseng pulis na to. May sakit ito sa utak, tupak. And I'm just wondering why he was able to nakalusot sa neuro. May tupak talaga ang.
During his public address last night, President Duterte ordered the Philippine National Police to make sure that Nuesca will rot in jail.
And I don't think that you can escape the rigors of justice because nakuha sa TV, pati ako napanganga. Kawala-walang kwenta. That's unfair and brutal masyado.
The chief executive also clarified that this order to protect uniformed personnel does not exempt them from following the law.
Ako ulitin ko, mahal ko ang sundalo pati pulis. Alam mo bakit? Buhay ang tinataya nila. At ang sundalo pati pulis, ginagawa lang natin ng boy, parang houseboy.
Still, Bayan Muna Representative Ferdinand Gaite blames the president for this incident. Gaite believes the president's constant remarks have boosted the ego of some police officers.
We hear so much double speak. Sasabihin on one hand, ni Pangulong Duterte, kill 1,000, walang makukulong na pulis o militar o sundalo. Nagbigay ka ng enabler ka ng ganung attitude at ganung paniniwala.
The public, meanwhile, is divided on the issue.
Naka-apekto talaga yun. Parang lumaas kasi yung loob ng mga pulis eh. Lalo na rin, tinasan yung mga benepisyo nila.
Alam naman natin si Presidente, pag sinabi niyang gano'n, yung kailangan nasa tama ang pulis.
For former Defense Secretary Orly Mercado, weapons provided to law enforcers add to the culture of violence in the organization. Mercado says stringent screening of police officers must be enforced to change this culture.
Ang importante talaga, when you hire people that are going to be given power and can use arms, and kahit na sa ordinary situation, hire on character, train on skills. Yung kakayahan na bumaril, etc., you can acquire that eh. Pero yung karakter ng tao, Napaka-importante.
Interior Secretary Eduardo Año insists that this is just an isolated case. Año assures the public that the government will not tolerate this act among police authorities and that justice will be served. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
This is not the first time Nuesca has faced criminal complaints. Records from the Philippine National Police show he has a history of grave misconduct for homicide cases as well as other administrative sanctions. Nuesca, for example, faced a 10-day suspension a decade ago for having refused to attend mandatory police training. 3 years later, he faced an administrative case for grave misconduct, although the case was eventually dropped. In 2014, he was suspended for a month for having refused to take a drug test. 2 years after that, he was charged for serious neglect of duty for failing to attend a court hearing where he was a prosecution witness for a drug case. The charge against him was also dropped. Now, last year, Nuesca faced 2 separate cases of grave misconduct for homicide. Both cases were linked to confrontations during buy-bust operations against illegal drugs. We have to take note that Nuesca had been part of the Special Operations Task Group of Parañaque City's anti-drug unit before he was part of the city's crime unit. Both homicide cases against Nuesca were dismissed after the PNP Internal Affairs Service, or the IAS, found that the evidence presented justified the drug killings. But unlike with his 2 cases, which were dropped on justifiable reasons, the IAS says him shooting 2 civilians in Tarlac leaves no room for interpretation. They may come up with a recommendation for Nuesca's dismissal from the service by the 3rd week of January.
Sabi ng decision ng Supreme Court, ang video, ang picture, speak 1,000 word, hindi na kailangan na may testigo. Because the thing itself, yung video at saka picture ay speak for itself.
Nuesca is already behind bars, but the Gregorio Patriarch still fears for the safety of his family. But as Justine Punsalang tells us in this report, he too is concerned for Nuesca's daughter, who has been the subject of ridicule and bullying following the murder. Let's watch this.
Loved ones filled the Gregorio residence on the first night of Sonia and Anton's wake. Even if their murderer, Police Senior Master Sergeant Jonel Nuesca, was already put behind bars, the Patriarch Florentino still worries for his family's safety.
Talagang pagdusahan niya yung ginawa niya sa aking mag-ina. Para naman ng mga anak ko, mapanatag din at saka ang hinihiling ko lang talaga ang proteksyon ng pamilya ko, buong pamilya namin. Dahil hindi namin alam kung ano ang hinatnan.
But he too is worried about Nuesca's 13-year-old daughter. He says the minor should not be cyberbullied and that she was just a victim too of wrong parenting.
Sana naman po, iyan niyo yung pagbabasa niyo na kasi masakit din sa kanila yun kahit na ganun. Kasi bata yan na kulang naman pag-aaruga ang inano ng magulang sa kanya. Kaya ganyan ang naging turing ng batang yan.
Anton's widow Ronalyn, despite her illness, traveled all the way from Pangasinan just to attend the wake. Anton was planning to reunite with his wife and their 1-year-old daughter this Christmas. They last met in September. But little did Ronalyn know that this was their final meeting.
Ano pong nararamdaman ni Ma'am na sa ganitong paraan niyo po siya makakasama mamaya? Masakit po.
June Rufino, meanwhile, is still in a state of shock. He could not look directly at the coffins of his aunt and cousin.
Yung mga anak ko, mga pamangkin ko, pagka kailangan po nila ng halimbawa po sa assignment po nila, si tita ko pong nilalapitan. Kasi teacher po siya.
June recalls how they have long planned their holiday reunion in the Gregorios. But alas, they would no longer be complete when that day comes.
Actually po talagang nakakuhan kami nitong, lalo na po nitong magbabagong taon, napag-usap-usapan po namin lahat ng magpipinsan na dito po kami magsasalo-salo. Dito rin po sa compound din po nila.
The PNP Internal Affairs Service also visited Sonia and Anton's wake. IAS Inspector General Alfegar Triambulo says they are already preparing administrative cases against Nuesca to ensure his dismissal from service.
Ito po ang kaso nito ay isang test case na tatapusin ko po ng 30 days. Kasi alam nyo po, ang kaso ng administratibo ay napapatagal, no?
The Social Welfare Department has already provided the bereaved family livelihood assistance. The DSW says it will also sponsor a psychosocial counseling for Nuesca's daughter. For News 5, Justine Punsalang, we are One News.
Meanwhile, the police chief of Bato, Catanduanes was dismissed today following his controversial remark on the Tarlac shooting incident. PNP spokesperson Brigadier General Ildebrandi Usana confirms that Captain Ariel Boraga has been relieved from his post. Let's recall that Bato, Catanduanes Mayor Juan Rodolfo asked the provincial police chief to replace Boraga. Rodolfo said he found disturbing Boraga's comments on the shooting. In a now-deleted Facebook post, Boraga said the brazen killings in Tarlac shows that, quote, even the elderly should learn to respect the police, close quote. Usana noted that the PNP has existing policies regarding the use of social media.
Hindi po maganda po sa PNP na nagsasalita ng mga bagay na instead of bridging the gaps, nag-i-stoke pa ng fires of hatred between and among the netizens po.
We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, the downtrend in COVID-19 cases in the country has come to an end, but is the recent surge in infections still manageable? And the palace is convinced it might be time to halt travel to the UK over fears of it spreading new variant of COVID-19. The details coming up next. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. Authorities have long been anticipating a surge in infections over the holidays, and over the last week, the worst has started to take shape, with the rise of cases hitting its highest in 2 months in the capital region. But is the spike still manageable? Greg Gregorio tells us.
Experts from the UP Octa say that the COVID-19 infection rate in the country has climbed to 1.03. This means that one individual gets infected from one positive case. The UP Octa team flags the infection rate in NCR alone, which has now gone up to 1.15. This as the country's average new daily cases have increased to 1,484 from 1,367 infections a few weeks ago. In Metro Manila, it reached 428 compared to the previous 370. UP Octa also notes that 9 cities in NCR have seen an increase in their average daily new cases. This signifies that the previous decreasing trend of new cases in Metro Manila has now ended. The group is now urging the government to improve contact tracing and increase testing capacity. They're also calling on the imposition of localized lockdowns if needed. For its part, the National Task Force Against COVID-19 acknowledges the increase in cases.
Ang mga kababayan natin ay gusto namang mag-enjoy ng konti, makasama ang kanilang mga mahal sa buhay dahil magpapasko na. Pero ang problema dito sa COVID, hindi pa rin siya nawawala.
Testing SAR and NTF Deputy Chief Implementer Vince Dizon adds that their safety reminders are coupled with efforts in preparation for the possible spike in cases. For its part, the Public Works Department is continuously building additional isolation units, including the newly turned over modular isolation units in Quezon City for severe and critical COVID-19 patients.
Nanggit ko yung flooring, yung down to the walls, pati yung oxygen tank, yung sa nurse call button. So kompleto siya. It's a fully operational hospital.
These 44 units are expected to be operational next month, while all 112 units will be finished by February. Off-site dormitories have also been built for health workers from Jose Reyes Hospital who will man the facility. Treatment SAR and Health Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega says that while the critical care utilization in NCR and the entire country is still at low risk, they are building more isolation facilities in other areas.
Sapat, but we have to prepare ourselves. This is really moving towards for next year when we would project possible surge. And we must increase our capacity. Kailangan talaga yon. 65% is already under completion ang Tala or Jose Rodriguez. And there's another one in Batangas.
Despite some laboratories unable to submit reports on time due to technical issues, Dizon notes that the country's daily testing capacity remains at 30,000. They are also aiming to add more COVID-19 laboratories, especially in areas without testing centers. As for stricter border controls, the DOH earlier leaves it to LGUs to implement such when necessary. Officials have once again appealed for the public's cooperation so that the country will not revert to stricter quarantine restrictions.
IATF is going to do everything in its power to make sure that while we manage the cases, the economy will continue to move and grow. Because our people need to work, our people need to earn a living, and they need to survive.
For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Speaking of public cooperation to manage the spike in cases, some Quezon City residents cannot let go of their partying ways despite the pandemic. This has prompted barangay officials to enforce stricter quarantine measures. JC Cosico has this report.
Officials of Barangay Santo Domingo in Quezon City conducted rounds in several streets this morning. Using a megaphone, they blasted reminders to observe COVID-19 health protocols like the wearing of face masks.
Ate, magandang umaga. Nasa labas po kayo ng yung pong face mask po. Suot po natin. Open na open po tayo eh.
Parents of minors were also told not to let their children out in the streets.
Pasuyo po dun sa mga bata na nandyan sa likod ng sasakyan. Kayong 5 bata dyan, wala kayong mga face mask at face shield. Uwi kayo doon. Pasuyo naman po sa mga magulang ng mga batang ito.
Parents whose children are caught outside will be penalized. This is part of the LGU's stricter measures to control the spread of COVID-19 in the city.
Hindi ko lang po siya palalabasin. Para rin po sa kaligtasan ng anak ko po.
Barangay officials say the installation of CCTV cameras helped them monitor compliance to health protocols. This was how they monitored a mass gathering last December 18. Residents without protective gear and who weren't physically distanced were engaged in a drinking session. After dismissing the barangay's constant warnings, the group decided to run away when police personnel entered the scene.
Kasi syempre undermanned din kami. Yung manpower namin konti lang. Tapos ito kabilang area na. So imbes na punta kami ng punta yung tao namin, through CCTV, nakikita namin sila.
A mass gathering also resulted to a 2-week special concern lockdown in Aguilar compound in Barangay Tandang Sora. This was after a resident who eventually turned out to be COVID-19 positive attended a birthday celebration. The lockdown will last until December 29.
Humingi na rin ako ng tulong sa ating mga purok leaders na mag-discourage ng mga party. Kahit birthday party, dinidiscourage natin para mas wala nang lumala pa yung COVID.
Total COVID-19 cases in Quezon City have reached more than 27,000, around 5% of which are active cases, according to data from the LGU. For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
The new and highly infectious COVID-19 strain in the United Kingdom is more highly transmissible, say scientists. The new and emerging respiratory virus threats advisory group, or NERVTAG, says with high confidence that the new variant is 70% more transmissible. NERVTAG's present data also suggests it is more likely to affect children. Australia has said it had already detected the mutated strain. Apart from the UK's neighboring countries, the likes of Hong Kong have already halted flights to and from Britain. In the Philippines, a number of lawmakers are already pushing for travel bans to the UK. The palace says it might be high time to consider halting travel to and from the country, but that the COVID-19 task force will study the matter first. Epidemiologist Edsel Salvana told sa Radyo 5 that it has yet to be determined if the experimental vaccines would work against this new strain.
Hopefully, itong mga bakuna mas intense, kumbaga, yung immune response mas tatagal. Hindi pa natin alam kung long term talaga or habang buhay, pero pinag-aaralan rin po ito.
The plan to acquire 60 million doses of vaccines may push through in the second and third quarters of 2021, as according to vaccine czar Carlito Galvez. That is also after India-based Novavax promised to deliver 30 million doses to the Philippines even without any cash advance. Novavax is still conducting phase 3 trials. It has not yet published its efficacy rate. The UK's AstraZeneca also pledged 20 million doses to the Philippines. AstraZeneca's vaccine will only cost $5 per dose, or around 240 pesos, with its non-profit, no-loss concept.
Baka this coming next week, either December 28 or 29, inaantay lang po namin yung Ministry of Health regulatory authorization ng UK, at pwede na po namin pirmahan yung kontrata.
We'll take another break. When we return, flood waters have started to recede in Cagayan, but will this mean Christmas celebrations at home for families there? And as he is considered high risk for COVID-19 in his old age, incoming U.S. President Joe Biden finally gets his COVID-19 vaccine shot. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. It is Christmas away from home for many Cagayanos who once again had to be evacuated due to rising floodwaters. To give us the situation on the ground, Romel Lopez reports live from Cagayan. Romel, is flooding in the area still that bad?
Yes, Robbie, floodwaters are already receding in some parts of Cagayan, but many residents here can only dream of better days during this holiday season. The Valdez family has no other choice but to seek refuge in their van parked along a road in Alcala, Cagayan. With their house still submerged in floodwaters, they had to put up a makeshift tent and make home out of the family vehicle.
Mahirap po, maginaw pa dito. Hindi kami makatulog magdamag. Lubog ang bahay namin. Maputik doon.
Her son Randy was electrocuted alongside another volunteer as they were rescuing trapped neighbors during the onslaught of Typhoon Ulysses last month. He used to look after his younger brother who has special needs. Tomorrow marks the 40th day since his passing.
Wala na akong pag-asa. Wala nang magbuhat yun sa anak ko. Yung tatay na senior citizen na po, hindi makabuhat. Kaya humihingi kami ng tulong po sa mga gustong tumulong sa amin.
Also living by the roadside is Celia Sinampan, who lost another batch of her crops due to the recent flooding. Her only comfort now is that her family can at least celebrate Christmas even if they have to make do with dole-outs.
Malungkot. Macaroni sana, idol, kaya lang walang kuryente. Spaghetti na lang. Meron na, idol, yung binigay yung mga sa sardinas.
In Tuguegarao City, the Maragon family hangs on to the hope that their missing relative will be found. Raymond was last seen swimming in the swelling Cagayan River last Sunday. The water level at Cagayan River has gone down to 9.7 meters today from 11.2 meters on Monday. And with only one Magat Dam's gate remaining open, Cagayan residents hope for their situation to improve as Christmas fast approaches.
Ravi, even as the province reels from both the recent massive flooding and the pandemic, Tuguegarao City Mayor Jefferson Soriano reminds the public of its ordinance prohibiting any physical Christmas parties. He stressed that the police and the barangay officials will be very strict in its implementation, especially because the city has recorded the highest number of COVID-19 cases here in Cagayan. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Romel Lopez. Now, time for the big stories in sports. A look at the game with Laura Lehman.
Thanks, Robbie. Big news for PBA fans. Calvin Abueva is staying with the Phoenix Fuel Masters. The 32-year-old signed a new long-term deal with the franchise following his impressive comeback in the Philippine Cup after a 16th-month suspension. Aside from leading Phoenix to the Final Four, Abueva also emerged as one of the best players of the conference. The Beast came in second only to Bobby Ray Parks in the stats race, recording 37.1 statistical points. The PBA champion and 2016 best player of the conference averaged 15 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists per game in the bubble. On to the NBA. As the Brooklyn Nets prepare for a run at the title with their revamped franchise, 2019 three-point champ Joe Harris spoke about their mindset heading into the new season.
I think, the way that we look at it is, this is the place that everybody wants to get to. When you're an organization in the NBA, you hope to have these level of expectations. You hope to have championship aspirations that are realistic. And so for us to be at this point, we're just taking it all in.
That's it for the latest in the world of sports. Catch us again later at 9:30 p.m. only here on One News and One Sports Plus. I'm Lara Lehman, and this has been The Game.
Thanks, Laura. U.S. lawmakers passed a $900 billion coronavirus relief package on Monday as the country continues to fight a surge in cases. The multi-billion-dollar stimulus bill is now headed to President Donald Trump for signing into law. The relief package includes a $600 billion financial aid to Americans, as well as additional payment support for those who lost work. If signed into law, this would be the second largest stimulus package in U.S. history, next to the $2 trillion relief bill passed last March. This as incoming President Joe Biden has gotten his shot of the COVID-19 vaccine a month before officially taking office. Biden received its first jab of the Pfizer vaccine at a hospital in his hometown of Delaware. At 78, he is considered high risk for the disease. After taking the shot, however, he encouraged fellow Americans to get vaccinated and to comply with health protocols. A Santa from California may not be coming to town tonight after he got entangled in power wires while paragliding over the weekend. A man who dressed up as the jolly old St. Nick traded Rudolph for a paraglider and flew around in Rio Linda to spread joy and bring candy canes to kids in the area. Everything was going merrily for the paragliding Santa, that is, until he hit a power pole and got snarled up in the lines for about an hour. Sacramento authorities were able to rescue him and brought him to safety on the ground. Luckily, Mr. Claus was neither injured nor electrocuted, and that might just be his Christmas miracle. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Only 3 days to go before Christmas. Tuloy na tuloy pa rin ang Pasko, kapatid. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.
Tayo'y maging liwanag ng Pasko.